Hello and welcome back to Jack Knives Reviews. I'm of course your host, Jack Knives. Today I'll be reviewing the Netflix original series, Baby Reindeer. Struggling comedian Richard Gadd works as a bartender part-time. One night he meets an upset woman who he gives a drink to. This one-kind act will reopen his past trauma and enter him into a spiral of harassment, assault, and stalking. If I were to describe this show in one sentence, it would be important and uncomfortable. It is a show that I believe is a necessary show for people to watch, despite the fact that it is extremely difficult to watch at times. Not necessarily due to the gore or violence or anything in that regard. It's more of the feeling. This would already be a hard enough show to make if you were retelling someone else's story, but for Richard Gadd to actually not only be opening up about his own past trauma, about his own situation, but for him to write, direct, and star in it, essentially reopening the wound and replaying it in his head. I don't know many people that would be strong enough to do that. I'm not gonna lie, I had never heard of Richard Gadd up until this point. I know he was a very underground comedian in the UK, and apparently this story, which really did happen to him, granted, they did have to change some things. He turned it into a one-man show that was critically acclaimed, which was him also retelling the story on stage. So for them to turn that into essentially a biopic. But there are actually instances in the show where it's Richard Gadd talking to the camera as if it's like a true crime documentary, like retelling the events therein. And the juxtaposition is heavy. It's a very heavy show. Heavy in the sense of necessary heaviness, but I also feel that I could also see this making people too uncomfortable. It deals with a lot of issues like sexual identity, parasocial relationships, and, well, stalking. Apparently, at the time of me recording this, the woman who I guess outed herself, despite him never actually giving her real name, allegedly she's going to be going on to Piers Morgan and essentially set the record straight, but I don't know what kind of record you could set straight for this sort of thing. Having watched the series, there wouldn't be justification for any of it. It's like uncomfortable to watch at times. But it's also, you feel like, at points, you feel like a person who's telling you a really, really messed up thing that happened to them. And even though you can't necessarily relate to it, you're trying to be there for them. And the show encapsulates that really, really well. In a way that I don't think many shows really could. The show is apparently really, really taken off with a lot of people because a lot of people have either known or been in similar situations with people with an unrequited love interest to them, or them having an unrequited love, and it basically forces you to step back and reevaluate how you are to someone in those sort of relationships. The cast is pretty spot on. There isn't really any major standouts besides, of course, Richard Gadd himself and the main woman. And considering I watch horror on a regular basis, for me to feel uncomfortable in this sort of situation is saying quite a lot. I think it's more to do with the contextualization of it, the effects therein of someone stalking you. to the point where you feel uncomfortable even doing anything and feeling like you are the one who instigated the things when you really didn't, but reflecting on it. And that's essentially what this whole series is Richard Gadd essentially reflecting on everything that happened and replaying it in his head and going like, did I cause this? Is this my fault? And I'm sure looking back on it and his maturity of the reflection of it has shown, no, of course it wasn't. It's one of the heaviest shows I've ever seen, as far as like this kind of a subject matter especially. And it's handled in a mature way that can alienate audiences, I believe. But I feel it's a show that people should watch. It's just the right balance of heavy and seriousness. But you need to be at your own pace to watch it. I give Baby Reindeer 4 out of 5. Have you seen Baby Reindeer? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I'll see you next time.